Hi everyone, Tim here, your host of the Amateur Rugby Podcast, and I'm just popping online here on Facebook Live to have a little chat about promotion of the podcast and how I'm going about that myself. It's a stinking hot day here in southwest London, Bank Holiday Monday, a real rarity. Normally it rains on days like this in the UK. It's been a great weekend of sport. England with a pretty dominant performance against Ireland at the weekend. I think Ireland were as bad as England were good, though, to be fair. So there's no, we're not getting ahead of ourselves, certainly not at the Amateur Rugby Podcast. And then, of course, the amazing scenes yesterday up at Headingley where Ben Stokes did one of the most incredible things that I've ever seen in sport. So well done Ben and the England cricket team for getting the Ashes back on track. But I'm here to talk to you today, yes, about promotion, this series of videos that I'm doing, just taking you through the whole process of setting up a podcast, because as I've told you before, I've never done any of this. It's all new for me, so I thought I'd share the process. And this is episode 6, or it might be 7, I'm not sure, I've lost count now, to be honest, but this one's all about promoting of the podcast. So, what channels am I using to promote the podcast? Firstly, social media. It's where a lot of my potential listeners will be hanging out. I've not been a big user of Twitter in the past, but I know from listening to plenty of other rugby podcasts that a lot of rugby conversations do go on Twitter. So I have taken the time to set up a Twitter account, and I'm being active on there. Another place where people are very active is Facebook, as I'm sure you're well aware. So I've taken some time to set up a Facebook page and started sharing content through both those channels. Now, what type of content works well? Well, things that have got visual elements always have more dwell time and more engagement, and people tend to see them more and interact with them more. So I've tried to make sure that I've included an image, things like this, the Facebook Lives, so people can interact with them and become aware, just telling the story of what I'm doing with this podcast. I've also set up a YouTube channel because some people do search for podcasts on YouTube. So when the podcasts start going live, which will be September 8th, is going to be the first ones. When they start going live, then they'll also be available on YouTube in the following days. But I've also posted up all these videos that I've been creating here on Facebook Live, so that there's just a permanent record or a permanent resource for people to go and look at. But and lastly, there's a website. So I have the website up and running now. Currently it's incredibly simple, and all its job is to indicate how long it is until the podcast is going to be going live, and to collect email addresses from people who want to stay in touch and be put on the mailing list. Now, it's important to do that really for a few reasons. Is the social media channels, they can kind of be taken away from me at any point. You know, if Facebook or Twitter decide that they don't want, my content on there anymore, then I'm always going to be at their whim. So, but an email list is mine, and that's something that I can always use as a resource, just to keep people informed of everything that's going on at the podcast. So I definitely recommend getting a website set up and collecting email addresses so you can stay in contact with your listeners. The last thing I always try and ask people to do is just word of mouth. I learn about podcasts via word of mouth probably more than anything else. So whenever I mention the social media or sharing or leaving reviews or whatever like that, I always make sure to ask people to mention it when they're next down their local rugby club. Tell somebody who's involved with the game about the Amateur Rugby Podcast. If if you're enjoying what's going on, then just mention it to somebody, and it'll be gratefully received. So that's it. That's how I'm setting about promoting the podcast. That's my sort of theories and ideas about that. So thanks for listening, and until the next one, get out and play. Cheers.